So I'm Matt. I'm a software engineer I'm currently living in London, in the UK. And I seem to have this really strange, well, I've written love, I don't know if I'd say love, but I seem to keep coming back to the problem of how to add dark mode to a web app. And so but first a bit of house cleaning. So the slides, if you're interested, are on my GitHub, and it's just Matt Stobbs. I have a blog, which I mentioned quite a lot, because it's about adding dark mode to a blog. So if you're interested, my blog's mattstobbs.com. And the best way to contact me if you want to ask me something later is probably Twitter. And I'm Matt_Stobbs. But yeah, so as I was saying, about 6 months ago, I created my blog as it is at the moment. I used a Svelte framework called ReactJAX. And as I wrote in the blog post, I wrote about it afterwards. One of the trickiest parts of creating it was the dark mode. And so I wrote a blog post explaining kind of my solution to creating the dark mode in ReactJAX. 6 months later, I was playing around with Remix and bumped into similar problems with Remix. And so I went to the source code for Kent C. Dodd's blog, which is just the perfect place to go if you're interested in learning Remix, because it's just this massive, complex site that is like the gold standard almost of how to use Remix. So I looked at how he did dark mode on his site and thought it was really interesting. So wrote a blog post about how he implemented dark mode in Remix. So 2 blog posts in 6 months on dark mode. It's not a lot, but it's kind of weird that it's happened twice. And so, it's a problem that I'm pretty familiar with. And so for this presentation, this talk, I wanted to quickly cover why is dark mode a problem? It seems like it should be relatively straightforward to do. So why is it a problem? How does a typical UI framework solve this problem? And then how does Remix solve the problem? And my goal, I guess, is to convince you that, or at least to show you that how powerful Remix is, and it gives you some really powerful tools that really help tackle both dark mode and any challenge that you have as a developer. As a disclaimer, I'm not super familiar with Next.js. I've played around with it, but when I talk about typical UI frameworks, feel free to correct me if I say something that isn't right about Next.js. But I won't be comparing it directly to Next.js. That's my escape hatch. So to start off with, why is dark mode such a hard problem to solve? You really have 3 problems you need to overcome with dark mode. You need to figure out how are you going to control which of your theming styles you want to show. So usually you'll have a class either on your root node or on your body node, somewhere high up your HTML tree, that you're going to toggle on and off depending on, and that will kind of tell your CSS which theme to show. So how do you control that class toggling high up your tree? How do you then persist what your user's chosen? So if they come back to the page, you show them the same theme, or even if they just refresh the page, how do you not lose what they've chosen? And then how do you show them that correct theme before hydration? I call it the flash of doom, and we'll talk more about that later. So to start with, how do you control which styles? Most UI frameworks, this is the kind of area of control they'll give you. They'll have the HTML and they'll have a div that will have an ID of root or next or whatever, and they'll kind of say, here is where you do your React. This is where you control what it looks like, which works well for 95% of things, but it gets slightly messier when you need to start updating things outside of this area of control. So if you wanted to toggle a class name of the root node, for example, you'd have something like this. You'd have your theme toggle component with a button with a toggle theme, And then you'd have to write some JavaScript and get the root element and toggle the dark class. And this is fine, it works, but it kind of feels icky, I guess. It feels a bit gross. It's, nowhere else in your React code are you going to have a child component updating the class name of a parent component by using JavaScript selectors. And you can imagine that, there's no direct dependency between the class name and the root component and this component. And so if you have a lot of these and you're wondering why is my root component got this certain class, it can get a bit hard to debug what's editing what. Remix, on the other hand, gives you full control of everything. The root component has, well, this is what it looks like. So this would be your route, as they probably want us to say, but I'm English, and so I call it the root, which is quite annoying. And so inside your root, it's just a component, but you're rendering everything. You have your HTML, your head tags, your body tags. If you want it to be in your HTML, you put it in this component. If you don't put it in this component, it won't be in your HTML. You control everything. And so if you want to set a class name on your HTML element, just add a class name. And then, what is theme? Well, usually you're going to store theme in context, so everything can access it, everything can update it if it needs to. So you can do that just as you do in React. You can just create context, create a provider. Inside the provider. Just return your provider.
Hey Matt, sorry to interrupt. I think the sound is coming in and out, unless it's on my end.
I think it might have just been me stopping talking, but
sorry.
No worries. Oh yeah, sorry, I couldn't type fast enough, so I had to stop talking. But can you hear me okay now?
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. So yeah, so you just create your theme provider. You can just pass pass in the value normally would. And the question then is, how do you get it to your app? And so you need to wrap this. This is just a component, as you would with any. And so, like you would with any component, you can wrap this component in your providers. So we'll call this one app providers. Created. And so now our app is wrapped around in this theme provider. We can just use React context inside our app. And that gives us our theme. And it's such a small thing, but like the fact that you can wrap your whole HTML in a provider and just use it like every other bit of your React, it blew my mind when I first saw it. It just makes like so much sense to me that like this should be a thing, and it just feels so cool to be able to just use your HTML and your head as if they were just like every other part of your JSX. So that solves our how to control our styles. We just control our class name like we do in any other component. So then the question becomes, how do we persist our users' selected preference? And so for most UI frameworks, you have pretty much three options. You can use IndexedDB, session storage, or local storage. Indexed DB is asynchronous, and as we'll see later, we want it to be synchronous, and so that leaves us with session storage and local storage. So we'll have a quick Google about what the difference is, which I have to do every time, and we'll decide pretty much that local storage is what we want. So this is what, somewhere in our typical UI framework, we'll have a component, and this is how we'll set our initial state. Something we'll be calling use effect, which will access the local storage to get our initial theme, and we'll set our class list to be that theme. But the problem with this approach is that because this is inside a use effect, this is happening after we've rendered. And so if a user who wants dark mode hits our page, they're going to be hit with our light page before the dark mode eventually kicks in. And they're going to be blinded as they're scrolling at 2 a.m. in the morning. And so the way that you can get around this, so this is HTML, which I've just taken straight from my blog. You want, typically you'll stick a script tag somewhere near the top of your HTML. I'm putting it in the head, but some people put it at the start of the body. And the purpose of the script tag is, so script tags, their default behavior is it's blocking. They block everything until they finish running. It's why when you, which slide was it on? It's why typically you want your script to be at the bottom of your body, because you want the body to render before you run your scripts, otherwise they hold up rendering everything. But here, the fact that it's blocking is a good thing, because it's stopping our, we don't want anything to render until we figured out what the initial theme is. It's also why we wanted to use synchronous local storage instead of asynchronous IndexedDB. It's because we want it to be blocking. But then again, the question becomes, how do you then get the script tag into the head or the body, given that it's kind of outside of the area of control that the UI framework gives you? And so most UI frameworks will give you some kind of escape hatch. So in Gatsby, they'll let you create a file called Gatsby SSR, which will give you these hooks like on render body, set pre-body components. So you can put components that will be put just before the body. In Elder.js, which is what I'm using, they give you a hooks file, which is a similar thing. They give you a bunch of hooks where you can push things into the head stack, which is the stack of tags that will eventually get compiled into the head. They're kind of these escape hatches that let you hack your way into the final source code. But as you may have guessed, you don't need that with with Remix. You can just stick it straight in the head. And in fact, because this is just JSX, you can wrap it in a component. So here we have our the string that will be injected into the head. And we've just created this component that takes that string, and we can just put it into the head component, and it will just render as we want it. But in fact, with Remix, we can take a step back and ask, do we still need local storage? Because with Remix, we have both the front end and the back end. And so Remix gives us a fourth option, which is cookies. And what's nice about cookies is that the back end can read the value, which means that our back end, when it's rendering the page, can know what the class name should be on our root component before it sends it back to the client. We don't need to run the JavaScript to see what the preference is. The server already knows. Remix makes it really easy to use cookies. They give us this create cookie storage, create cookie session storage, which just lets us create a, well, like it says, create a cookie session storage. You just pass in the options you want. And these options are coming straight from the MDN set cookie docs. So this isn't necessarily Remix, this is actual web development that you're learning kind of accidentally as you're using Remix. And then I also created this kind of helper function that will take a request, read the header and get the right session storage, and then you get the theme value and set it. So we'll be using these later. So once we have our cookie session, The question becomes, how do we update it every time the theme updates? And the way you do that in Remix is through actions. And so actions are usually associated with routes. But in this case, we don't actually want to render anything. And so Remix calls this a resource route. So I've got an example of that down here. So we have a loader, which is run when this route loads. And you can see we're just going to redirect straight away. So this will never actually render anything. It will just, if anyone tries to get to this route, they'll get redirected straight to the route route. But here in our action, so this is going to be called when we make a post request to this route, which we'll see later. Here we're going to take our request, get the theme session, get the theme from the request. So inside the request, we'll send our new theme value. We'll set the theme value on our cookie, and then we can return we can send a response back with the new cookie value inside the header. And this might make a bit more sense after this slide. So this is our theme provider, which we created earlier. And so we need code that says every time theme updates, we need to update our cookie value. And the way that we can do that in Remix gives us a hook called useFetcher. And what useFetcher does is it lets us call the action of a route without navigating to that route. Or this theme, because that's what we're going to use. So inside our useEffect, every time the theme updates, we want to run this useEffect. And inside this useEffect, we will call our persist theme, which is coming from the useFetcher submit. The first field is going to be the body of the request that we're sending. So we want to send our new theme value. And we can set these options. So here we'll want to see the action. So this is the route that we want to send the request to. So in this case, action set theme. And the method, which in this case is post. So we'll send a post request. So this is saying every time theme updates, we will send a post request to the route action/set theme with the new theme value. So that will call this action, which we can then get the cookie session, because every request to the server contains the cookie in the header. Or the header in the cookie in the header. So we can get the current theme session, and we can get the new theme. We'll update the cookie to have the new theme value, and then we can send the new value back as the set cookie header. Hopefully that makes sense. And so that means that now, after all that work, we don't necessarily, well, it means that now we can get our initial value for our theme provider from the server instead of having to run the script tag on the client. And so the way that we would do that is in our route, we can have our loader. Try to get my notes so I don't miss anything. We can have our loader with our request. Again, we can get our theme session using what we did before. Request. Pass down the data to the component. Session. So the loader is getting basically the theme value from the cookie and sending it as part of the response to the client, which means that inside our components we can use the hook use loader data, which again comes from Remix. Just get the theme and pass that into our theme provider. And the theme provider can then use that to set the initial value. The last thing we need to ask ourselves is, do we still need this script tag then? And the answer is yes, but only when we don't have a value in our cookie. So when the user hasn't already set, like told us what preference they want, and we want to use a default of their system preference. In that case, we will need to run JavaScript because we'll need to figure out what their system preference is. And so we can render this conditionally depending on whether if we have a cookie value, then we don't need to render this. And so we can do the same thing. We can get the theme from the loader. Prop code. This is our theme, which will be either true or false depending on whether we've saved a theme in our cookie. And then we can update our component. That's true. The user has already saved a preference and we don't need our script tag. So we can just return null. And yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to show. Remix, I appreciate that was pretty fast, but hopefully it conveyed that Remix is pretty awesome. It gives you tons of tools to really leverage the platform, both with cookies and being able to kind of manipulate the whole HTML tree. And it's just a really you just accidentally learn more about web development as you use it, because it's just letting you leverage the platform so much. But yeah, I appreciate that was quite quick. If you have any questions, if you have questions on, I guess, the specifics of what I did, feel free to read my blog post on it, where I go into more detail about actually how to add dark mode. This was more of a, let me show you the I guess, an overview of the tools compared to other UI frameworks. Yeah, if you have any questions, let me know.
That was awesome. Really quickly, I know that this was a presentation on dark mode, but I feel like that presentation taught us so much about how to use sessions and cookies inside of an application like this. So you can take this presentation and then go start doing all sorts of data manipulation back and forth between the client and server. I love it. Thanks so much.
Yeah, like I said, that's one of the cool things about Remix, is that like it just teaches you how to, like, I never thought that I would, even though I'm a front end, I use React in my day job every day, but I never think of using cookies. Like, in my head, they're just like beyond me. I never, but with Remix, it's just such an easy thing to do. You're like, oh yeah, I can just use a cookie for that. And yeah, it was really cool learning about the dark mode, because it just taught you all the stuff it can do.
Nice. Should we open up to questions? If anyone who's on here wants to unmute or just drop in the chat, feel free.
I have a question. So for your blog, did you just start it from like scratch, from like a remix, like what is it, create remix type thing, or did you like use any templates or anything like that? Any CSS frameworks or anything like that?
Yeah, so currently my blog, as I said, is with ReactJAX, which is Svelte. I'm in the process of migrating it over to Remix. And for that, I use the default remix kind of, create remix that they have on their website. I'm using Tailwind for the styling because Tailwind's just awesome. I love using Tailwind, and it just makes everything go so much quicker. And Tailwind I find is a lot like Remix in the sense that you kind of accidentally learn CSS as you're using Tailwind, which is really nice. And yeah, so that's why kind of things like this pop up. I wonder, it's also why it's taking longer than I expected, because I'm not migrating from a React site to a React site. Moving everything from Svelte to Remix has been quite interesting, because it makes me appreciate that Svelte gives you a lot of stuff for free. You have to figure out how to do that in React. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Yeah.
What do you use for like content management, or like where are the blog posts stored?
Yeah, so that's the problem that I've been wrestling for the past probably like 2 or 3 weeks. Pretty much as soon as this blog finished, the next problem I moved on to was, how do I render the content? Because so with my current site, I just have them in markdown files. But one of the main motivations for moving over to Remix is that I want to be able to use MDX. So I want to be able to render kind of React components within my blog post instead of just having static, which you can't do with Elder.js, which is what I'm using. And yeah, it's so there isn't really a standard way of doing that in Remix. Remix supports MDX kind of by default, in the sense that if you just create a root that has .mdx at the end, it will render that page for you. It will compile it and render it for you, which is really nice. In fact, let me just bring up the docs. It might be easier to show kind of what it does. You can and then you can also where is it? Yeah, you can also import from an MDX file, and this will give you like the attributes, like the front matter and the component, which you can just I guess you can't see that here, but it also gives it also gives you this component which you can just render inside anything. So it supports MDX in that sense, but it gets a bit trickier when you want to do it kind of from a CD, what was it, CMS? That's it, content, a CMS. I think I am going to stick with keeping it in the same repository as the rest of the code. I'm again using Kentsy Dodds as an example. I want to do this GitHub. So what? So Kent has it. He just has a content directory that holds all his blog posts, and then he either has it just as an MDX file, or he has 2 files. One is the MDX file, and the other one is the components for that file. And then he has a bundler that kind of reads both of these files and manages to get the JSX into the MDX. So that's the approach I'm taking at the moment, and it seems to be working. I just need to figure out how I want to handle caching, because yeah, it's not lightning quick without caching.
I had a quick question I was going to ask. As far as reasons wanting to move away from Svelte to Remix, what problems did you have with Svelte?
Yeah, so I really like Svelte. I really like Svelte. The reason I chose Svelte in the first place, I guess, would be a good context, is because I thought for my blog, it's just basically static content. It doesn't need a lot of JavaScript. And so Svelte gave you all the benefits of React, in the sense that you can use components, reusable components, and it's kind of, a really nice templating language. Remix is over-engineering my blog, but the reason that I decided to move towards Remix, so there's 3 things. 2 are kind of minor, and 1 was the big one. The big one is because I want to use MDX, and so that basically means either Remix or, so it was between Remix and Next in that sense. The other two were, so Remix is really nice with progressive enhancement. So a big thing with Remix is that it will work without JavaScript, for example. So if you have a really bad connection, so if you, I don't know if you've had a chance to try the jokes tutorial on the Remix docs. There's the you make a jokes app, and you go through the whole thing. You you add your styling, you set up your database, you have your form that you add jokes to and things. You have your error handling, and right at the end, that's when you add the JavaScript. So the whole you don't realize, but you've done the whole tutorial, and then they kind of reveal like you haven't even been using JavaScript. You've just been using the web, like submitting forms and things. It's like a plot twist halfway through the tutorial. And so, yeah, I thought that would be nice. Like, so for example, my site, it's all static. So it does great with Lighthouse, but these are just A tags. So there's no client routing, which Remix would give you. But Remix gives you the fallback of it will do the static server navigation if you have bad connection. And then the third reason was because it gives you access to the server, it just opens up the possibilities of doing hard things. Again, Kenzie Dobbs was talking about how on his site, so you can join a team. Is it on this site? I guess actually you'll see it if you go to the Remix conf. So these images, they shuffle every time the page is loaded, and it's just really easy to do that. It's quite hard to do this with server-side rendering because you need the kind of the back end and the front end to kind of be in sync with each other. But with Remix, it's really easy to do. In the sense that Remix just, I don't know, just the fact that you have control of the back end gives you more control, gives you more power, I guess, if that makes sense. And as far as I know, all these things you can get with Next as well. I just happened to be playing with Remix at the time and thought, why not migrate over to Remix?
Awesome, thank you.
I got one question. I've never really played with Svelte so far, and I was just wondering, because I know you also happen to be on the Discord server of Remix, right? How's the Svelte community compared to Remix? Because the Discord server and the Remix community feels very active. You get a lot of help when you post something. How's Svelte in that sense?
Yeah, so the Svelte community is as far as I know, really good. I'm on the Svelte Discord as well. I don't pop up on the Svelte Discord as much as I do on the Remix one. But so Svelte, the community itself is way smaller than the React community, and well, I guess it's probably about the same as the Remix community. It's a really small community, but it's a very, so the people who use Svelte are very, very pro Svelte. I think that's why if you in the I don't know if you've heard of State of JS, but every year they do a survey of I guess the state of JavaScript. State of JS 2021. Somewhere there's the State of JS 2021, but I can never figure out how to get there. Anyway, this one. In the latest State of JS, Svelte has a higher satisfaction rate of React. And I think that's just because not as many people use Svelte, but the community that do use it are really into Svelte. And so the framework that I use, Elder.js, it's tiny, hardly anyone uses it. But they have I can't remember what it's called. A channel, is that what it's called on Discord? For Elder.js. And the creator of Elder.js is there. And every time I had a problem, I just messaged in there and got a response in a few hours, which, yeah, just seemed crazy to me that even though hardly anyone uses it, he's still super into supporting it. So yeah, if you're interested in Svelte, the Svelte Discord's a great place to be. Very active and yeah, very helpful.
Cool, thanks.
I feel like I'm speaking about the enemy though, given that this is a React meetup.
All
No,
ideas
no,
are
no.
welcome.
No, there's no enemies. We're all on the same team.
All right. Any other questions for Matt? I'm going to try to roll up all of these links that I posted in the chat and drop them into the meetup event page, just in case you have questions later, including the link to Matt's blog, which looks very nice, by the way. It's very clean. I like it. I
Thank
like
you.
your dark mode too.
Yeah, it's, even though I don't use Tailwind at the moment with my blog, all of the colors are from Tailwind. It's just the easiest way of making anything look nice. And I don't have any creativity, and so that's why it's very minimalist, because I can't think of anything fancy to do.